Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast. We cover everything Major League, from spring training to the World Series. We've got your favorite club covered, from New York to Boston to LA. This is the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast.
Well, it is time for the GSMC Baseball Podcast. I want to thank you for tuning in. I am your host, Collin Manley, here on the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm excited, man. We're down in the final stretch. This is the last major week, at least. We're going to be talking about the regular season. A lot of things seem like they're going to be straightened out coming in the next few days, and that's just making the baseball season exciting, and we have so much that we need to talk about because of it. We know we're going to hit our news and noise like we always do on the podcast every time that I'm releasing one on Wednesdays and Sundays. Got to get you caught up on injury news because that's getting more and more important with these games. Well, counting down to the playoffs, but also some teams, they need to win these if they want to make the playoffs. We got to talk about that. We're going to take a look at standings and where our league leaders are in the season, as well as we're going to come across some of the series that are going to matter for this season, the ones that we think matter the most upcoming. And then we're going to take a few predictions. Going to say who we think the final teams that are going to be making the postseason, as well as some series we might see and just other things that we might potentially see in the playoffs altogether. But like we said before, we're going to start things off with news and noise around the league, getting you up to date. Something that I want to start with that I think is very, very, very important has to do with a clarification that's going to be made with the postseason and home field advantage when it comes to the World Series. Now, to be honest, there really is no home field advantage, quote unquote, because the World Series is going to be played in the Texas Rangers' new amazing stadium that was built. So we're not going to have any home team there per se, but we did figure out who's going to be the home field or who's going to have the last at-bats in this neutral site World Series. It had been come out from the recent agreement between the Major League and the Players Association that is actually going to be the higher seeded team, not the team with the better record, that will get home field. So, for example, let's say that a team from the American League is the number one seed. Let's just say that the Tampa Bay Rays, for example, come out as the number one seed for the American League, and they face the Padres, who are potentially the number two seed in the National League. Even if the Padres had a better record, the Rays would get to be the home team on the scoreboard, get the last at-bats, just because they are the higher seed overall. This is something that gets to be very interesting because as of recent years, we've been going with winning percentage for home field advantage for games 1, 2, 6, and 7. But that's not going to be the case for this year. We are going to dive into it's another discussion I have in the future. It's definitely something I want to talk about if we decide to stay with this 16-team format. Something needs to be changed because we can't go 1 seeds, 2 seeds to get the top spots. It's a situation where a team like the Padres this year potentially could have the second best. So it's between the Padres and Dodgers, second best, first best record in the same division. And yet they're going to be a 4 seed and have to see a much tougher opponent. And I understand the rebuttal to say, well, then win your division. But they've done everything right up to this point in winning games. The problem is there's just one team above them. And so they're having to face a better opponent because of it. But there's also a lot that goes into this just because of the fact that, hey, they get to play the same like opponents. So maybe that they're actually getting weaker opponents. But it's a big discussion. Definitely one to be had down the line. But it is something that needed to be pointed out as we are getting closer and closer to the postseason, which matters because, last at bats at a neutral site, even if you're not at your home field, That's going to be huge for some of these teams. So that's just one bit of news that's been released by the Associated Press today on, September 22nd. We'll see if it actually comes into play, if it really matters, or if we're going to have a winning percentage team take it anyways. It may not in the long run. It may not really truly matter, but it's definitely something to be brought up. Going on to some injury news. Starting things off with the Chicago Cubs, Kris Bryant. Well, his campaign with the Cubs this year has been very riddled with injuries, to take it lightly. Setbacks one after another, and another one came Monday night in Pittsburgh. Bryant was lifted in the third inning with tightness in his lower right oblique following an awkward swing in his first at-bat of the evening. We'll see if more information comes for Kris Bryant, but a team in the Cubs that's been solid. It looks like they're going to lock up the National League Central. I imagine he's going to rest until he's feeling pretty good to go, or at least getting some rest up until those postseason days. Maybe plays the game before to get some live action. But I imagine we're not going to see Kris Bryant doing anything too strenuous based on if things are really bothering him. For the Philadelphia Phillies, JT Realmuto was in the starting lineup as the Phillies catcher for Game 1 of Tuesday's doubleheader against the Nationals. He had been sidelined with a straight left hip flexor, so that's good news for a team that is clinging on to that 8th and final playoff spot right now, as of this recording. Philadelphia also had Bryce Harper back in right field for that game. The slugger served as the DH Monday, a day after exiting the Phillies' 6-3 loss to the Blue Jays due to some stiffness in his lower back. So good to see two of their big bats back for sure. Rhys Hoskins could try swinging a bat on Tuesday. He had some strained ulnar collateral ligament in his left arm, and he might need Tommy John surgery in the offseason, but he said last week that he hopes that he can play again this year. So DH is definitely going to be something that's still in the future for him, for sure. And also for the Phillies, Spencer Howard threw a bullpen session on Monday in their alternate site. Based upon how he feels Tuesday, he could throw another bullpen session or a live batting practice before possibly rejoining the team this weekend. For the Atlanta Braves, this has been an interesting story to watch. Starting pitching has been a problem for him all year, and it's going to continue to be a problem even going into the postseason. Well, Cole Hamels' attempt to accelerate his postseason preparation, it came to a screeching halt on Monday when the Braves left-hander was placed on the 10-day IL with a weak shoulders. Hamels was scheduled to make the second of what would have been 3 regular season starts on Tuesday against the Marlins, and that's going to be out of the picture now. The veteran southpaw missed the season's first 8 weeks while recovering with some left triceps tendonitis. This putting him on the 10-day means his regular season's done. I imagine postseason very much in question. What's going to happen? We'll see. But it looks like Cole Hamels potentially not going to be a major player for the Braves moving forward. Ken Giles will undergo Tommy John surgery, according to Blue Jays manager Charlie Montoyo, who said the closer will leave the team Tuesday to begin the process. This news was first announced in a post on Giles' wife's Instagram. The right-hander has had 3 IL stints due to elbow soreness and inflammation in the last 2 years, so just health overall has been a major issue for him. Before 2019, he had never been on the IL. It's an interesting move because he was potential trade piece earlier this season, but then the Blue Jays started to look pretty solid. So you thought maybe he's going to stay long-term because the value of relievers, it's hard to find quality ones. But now with all of these injury concerns, I imagine the Blue Jays are going to have to figure something else out going forward. Definitely bad news for Toronto when it comes to long-term outlook. Sonny Gray will come off the 10-day IL on Tuesday and be right back into a big game situation with some postseason implications when he works against the Brewers. Sonny Gray has been on the IL since September 13th with a right mid-back strain, and this is just must-win game for them. We're going to talk about this a little bit later in the pod, but the Cincinnati Reds, going back to one of the arms that's been a big reason to why they're even in this, considering their offensive woes earlier in the season, hoping to help them boost themselves into a postseason spot. Cincinnati fighting off Milwaukee. We'll see what happens with that one. For the Colorado Rockies, on Monday they placed Nolan Arenado on the IL with a left AC joint inflammation and a left shoulder bone bruise. It is the second career stint on the IL for this all-star third baseman. The move assures the Rockies of being without Arenado for the final 8 games of the season. 4 of them, which are at San Francisco starting Monday, and 4 in 3 days at Arizona starting Friday. This seems like a move in which the Rockies kind of know we're out of this postseason. Health long-term is the thing we're going to look at now, trying to make sure that we are ready for future seasons. And, Arenado is going to be a name of conversation when it comes to trade moves again. So having him healthy also brings more value if they're trying to get something back for him, for sure. For the San Diego Padres, Mike Clevenger played catch on Sunday, is slated to throw bullpen. He was on Monday's off day. That will go a long way towards determining whether he makes his return to the mound after being scratched from Saturday's start with some right biceps tightness. Clevenger being that huge acquisition for the Padres at the trade deadline. The trade deadline we thought to be very quiet. He's someone who's under club control for quite some time moving forward. So future-wise, it's not a big scary thing, but with the Padres' aspirations of maybe making a very, very realistic postseason push towards a World Series, are hoping to get him back sooner than later, but don't want to rush him as well, knowing how valuable he will be to your team long term. Walker Buehler for the LA Dodgers, dealing with a blister on his right index finger, is scheduled to return to the mound for the Dodgers on Thursday against the A's in Los Angeles. Right-hander threw a 90-pitch simulated game at the club's alternate training site at USC on Saturday. That came according to manager Dave Roberts, obviously trying to get everything ready. The Dodgers know they are making the postseason. They know they're going to be a high seed, want to have their pitching at top strength. So we'll see if everything goes according to schedule, and we see Buehler on Thursday, hopefully. Chad Pinder for the Oakland A's took a significant step back in his recovery from a right hamstring strain by going through a series of baseball activities at the Oakland Coliseum on both Saturday and Sunday. Pinder, who hasn't played since September 12th, is eligible to come off the 10-day IL on Wednesday, so that'll be when this pod is released, when the A's will be playing the second of a 3-game series at Dodger Stadium, but that's just when he is eligible. It was looking like things were not very positive moving forward. We'll see if we hear anything else. This could change, obviously, in a day. We might hear something different. He goes out, does some sort of activity, and then all of a sudden feels better. That will be no surprise, but definitely something to watch for Wednesday, see what the move is for the A's if they make a change from their alternate site. For the Houston Astros, well, if they hope to repeat as American League champions, it's going to be happening without Justin Verlander. The reigning AL Cy Young Award winner announced via his Instagram account on Saturday that he decided to undergo season-ending Tommy John surgery after feeling discomfort during a simulated game this week. Verlander will attempt to become the 10th known pitcher to return from Tommy John after undergoing the procedure at age 37 or older. That is something to watch. Conversation that I even had, you wondered about this. With this move, this decision, the Astros are not going to have Verlander next year. Greinke ending the near end of his contract, having some struggle from some players. The Astros have some major decisions when it comes to next season. I'm not saying full-on rebuild, but they are definitely going to have to make some moves if they want to contend in an American League that can be pretty tough, and in an American League West that teams are hoping to make an up and catch some ground on them, because outside of the Oakland A's has not been the most impressive competition. We'll see what happens there. And lastly, for the Baltimore Orioles, Jose Iglesias had to come out of Saturday's 3-1 loss to the Rays after he was hit by a Charlie Morton pitch in the second inning. The club announced that the x-rays were negative, and Iglesias was diagnosed with a left wrist contusion. The injury could cause the shortstop to miss a couple of games. And, manager Brandon Hyde, he said, you never know when someone gets hit in the wrist, hand area, and you're hoping for the best. He's obviously going to be really sore tomorrow. We'll see what happens with the Orioles. They're out of this postseason hunt as well. It's really just playing time at this point. We'll see what their decision is moving forward. So that's a look at some injury news, along with one little bit of postseason information when it comes to news and noise around the league, getting you caught up on everything around the MLB. We're going to take a quick break, and then we need to talk about where we're at with standings and league leaders on the season, taking a whole look around the MLB, coming up here on the GSMC Baseball Podcast on the GSMC Podcast Network.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
If you've been listening to the podcast, at least catching up with me when we have our 2 episodes a week, something that we've been loving to do around here is getting you up to date when it comes to standings, where teams are sitting as we are at a significant point in the season right now when we're coming down to the final stretch, as well as some of our league leaders giving shout outs to players to the incredible season that they might be having so far. These things have changed drastically. It's been fun to watch in a 60-game series because we know how much it can change over 162, even though we've seen, some guys stay consistently in a top 10 from start to finish. It really isn't too realistic to see it a lot. So it's been fun to talk about where these teams are, how their seasons, stories kind of have gone, as well as just the rotating door of names that have been there, kind of top 5 guys in a lot of the major statistical categories. And, when we start these things off, we have to talk about a division that has been quite a bit of fun, had its ups and downs, had a little bit of drama, but back to what I think we were kind of expecting a little bit this year. When we start off with that American League East, the Tampa Bay Rays sitting atop. They have been up on top of this thing for quite some time, sitting at 36-19, the most wins in the American League. Right now, sitting at the best win percentage, they would be the 1 seed. 17-9 at home, 19-10 on the road. Just been a steady team. 7-3 in their last 10. Ever since they've taken over the lead from the Yankees, they have just held on to it tight. And the Yankees sitting right behind them. They've lost 2 in a row, but that comes before, winning 8 in a row. They were a very strong team. We're slumping, but then hit a very great hot stretch. They know how to win at home. 21-7. 10-16 on the road is their big problem. They can score runs when healthy. It's very easy to argue potentially the best offense in the league when fully healthy. It's all going to be about health and pitching for them moving forward. Even Garrett Cole, the guy, he's been great, but he just hasn't been as dominant as we've seen him before. But that is no knock to him because he's still been a very solid starting pitcher in terms of the MLB overall. Sitting right below them, the Toronto Blue Jays, not quite clinching a playoff spot, but like the teams ahead of them, high probability of making the playoffs. The Rays and Yankees are clinched. They're in. The Blue Jays right now are sitting at 99.2% chance. They're slumping a little bit on a 2-game win streak, but 4-6 in their last 10. Have given up more runs than they have scored this season. Interesting when they have a winning record. Now, they are 3 games behind the Yankees. There is potential, obviously, to make that up, but they need a perfect situation to help them out. 3 losses from the Yankees or more, 3 wins for Toronto, and see where it goes from there. They are also a team that's been pretty solid at home. When you consider Buffalo their home, away not as good, 15-19. And behind them, the Baltimore Orioles and Boston Red Sox, 2 teams that are sitting far out of it, their playoff chances, while Baltimore has a slight 0.2% chance. The odds of that happening, obviously, very, very low. The Red Sox completely eliminated at a 0%. What we know about these 2 teams, their offense has potential there. It's all about keeping people off the board. Now, the Orioles actually have a better run differential on the season than the Blue Jays, but they are just not winning as many games. The Red Sox, their win differential, one of the worst in the bigs. They could score 250 runs this year. Problem is 323 runs given up. Easily leads the league. Pitching. And did I mention pitching is going to be the thing they need to figure out this offseason. For the American League Central, the Chicago White Sox holding on strong, 34-20, one of the best records in the MLB as well. Second in the American League. They have been, I don't want to say a surprise. We knew they were going to be good. We knew they were going to be talented. I just don't think many expected them to be the top dog in the American League Central. And, for what it's worth, they haven't necessarily taken anything yet. Same records home away, 17-10. That's good for them. Scoring runs, 280, one of the best in the bigs. They've lost 2 in a row, which matters. Even though they've clinched their playoff spot, they have not clinched the division because the Minnesota Twins are right there, 1.5 games behind. It's a shame they don't get to play at home because when they do, they are solid. When it comes to the postseason, that just ain't going to happen. 21-5 at home, 12-17 on the road. They've won 2 in a row as the White Sox have lost their 2 in a row. Both 6-4 in their last 10. Both clinched a playoff spot. But fighting for that American League Central because they would rather be a 1, 2, or 3 seed compared to being the 4 and having to play whoever our 5 seed is to be a very, very tough opponent. Cleveland Indians right behind at 30-24. They're 4 games back of the White Sox, 2.5 back of the Twins. So realistically, second place isn't out of it either for them. They have a high 100% playoff chance. Like to see that playoff probability. 4-6 in their last 10. They have won 2 in a row. All 3 of these teams having pretty good run differential. Now the Indians having the lowest runs scored, but some of the best pitching in baseball. Their starting pitching, even with the trading of Clevenger, dominant. Very, very good. We know that's going to be their strength moving forward. Then below them, the Detroit Tigers. Hey, you can't knock the Tigers. It's been a fun season. They've competed more than we've probably expected them to. Been great. The future gets you excited. I want to see a lot of these young names develop in Detroit. We'll see what happens going forward. Bummer that they play in a loaded AL Central right now, but hey, you never know what happens in the future. Team movement, development, there's a chance for anything. And the Kansas City Royals, probably one of the teams we also thought, between them and the Tigers, we thought they were going to be down low. They're showing a little bit of life at the end of the season, 6-4 in their last 10. They've been fun to watch as well. Just not as much talent, not as competitive as the other teams ahead of them. But we'll see. Things could be positive and bright for them potentially moving forward. For the American League West, the Oakland A's, the one and only team that has clinched so far in the AL West, 33-20, 20-8 at home, 13-12 on the road, plus 56 run differential, 5-5 in their last 10. But they're holding on strong with a 6.5 game lead in the division over the Houston Astros. Definitely one of the teams that we consider to be one of the disappointments, injuries included, but just overall performance. 27-27, 20-8 at home, 7-19 on the road. The Astros just do not win outside of Houston. Plus 2 run differential. This offense has been so good in the past. Seeing it struggle like this is definitely interesting. And it's obviously going to bring people questions, and they're going to love talking about it considering their allegations from future years. Well, why is your offense not as good? Hey, they've still scored 250 runs this year. That's a lot of offense. They're not doing a great job keeping people off the board. Seattle Mariners, it was fun. It was definitely fun. The playoff chances are still there at 1.1%, but I wouldn't bet on it. They are, at currently 3 games back of the Astros. It's been a young team putting together a fight at the end. 5-5 in the last 10. I just don't want to put them to bed yet. I want to hope. I want to give them a chance that they can climb up to that 2 spot. Just don't know if it's going to be great. A lot of bright young talent there. Fun young players led by Kyle Lewis on that team. And Seattle's going to have some nice expectations, I think, coming in next year. They're probably going to try to make some moves in the offseason, some things to solidify, maybe even bring up. They have a few other young talented players. They're going to be interesting. Interesting to watch for sure. And another team that's going to be interesting to watch, just a half game back of them, is the LA Angels, 6-4 in their last 10. They're half game behind the Mariners. 0.4% chance to make the playoffs. Again, it's not completely dead, but odds obviously aren't good. Offense is there. 274 runs scored. That's the best in the American League West. The best. Almost best in the Central. Almost best in the American League, period. I believe it's 3rd overall. And yet they just cannot win because why? Hey, remember that story of the Red Sox? They can't get people to stop scoring. 296 runs given up. figure out their pitching. Figure out their pitching, and that team gets to be very, very scary. Very. So we'll see what happens with the Angels moving forward, and then the Rangers down below. Who knows what the move is going to be with this team going forward? There's a little bit of talent on that team. There's a few trade chips, Lance Lynn being a big one. Maybe they move on from Joey Gallo finally, but we'll see. They're an interesting team to see, and it's when you're at the bottom of the AL West and you don't really have a plan. It feels like going forward, it's just a tough spot. Definitely a tough spot to be living. The National League East, the Atlanta Braves, 32-22. They have a 100% chance of making the playoffs. As the 1 seed in the East, 2 seed, we don't know yet. That has not been clinched or wrapped up in any way. 315 runs scored. They have been a tremendous offense. 255 runs allowed. That plus 60 run differential is awesome considering the pitching woes and issues they've had with the starting rotation. Props to them. The offense has just been carrying and lifted them up. Been some great things. Freddie Freeman's been great. Azuna's been doing some good things. That's just a loaded team. And in a 3-game series, 5-game series, 7-game series, whatever, it's going to be tough to keep those bats quiet. Right behind them, the Miami Marlins, 4 games back, 28-26. They have been a fun, awesome story. What they had to overcome to be here is awesome. The putting together a makeshift team during their big coronavirus outbreak and battling through, winning games, and being at the spot where they have an 88.5% playoff probability chance. I don't think people thought they were going to make the playoffs regardless to start the season. Then when you consider everything they battled through, it makes it an even better story. Minus 27, run differential, consistency. That's what this team needs. Offense and defense, pitching, consistent play from both sides. And we're going to be talking about this team a little bit more. At least another team with some young, fun players. They built a fun roster. Going forward, there's some more optimism and hope for the Marlins. The Philadelphia Phillies, a game and a half back of the Marlins. They're fighting for a playoff spot, 27-28 right now of this recording. They had a doubleheader today. 19-13 at home, 8-15 on the road. Minus 5 run differential, 280 runs scored, 285 runs against. We know about the woes in that bullpen. Their record would be a lot different if they could keep teams off later in games. But playoffs, things could turn around. We've seen some guys get hot that were potentially not having great regular seasons. Postseason is a whole different animal. Crazy things happen. The Phillies just got to make sure they get in and then go from there because their offense could be helpful. They're on a 3-game skid right now, 4-6 in their last 10. But if there is a positive for them, 52.5% playoff probability, so at least over half. But we'll see what they can do with that. Sitting on the outside of the NL East, the New York Mets, looking like it's not going to happen. 4-6 in their last 10 as well. 2-game skid. 3.9% playoff probability. It's looking like the Mets are going to be done. We'll see what happens with them moving forward. They're another team that's going to be interesting, having to make some decisions with their roster. Then the Washington Nationals sitting at the bottom. Injuries were a problem. They have some young, great talent. They have some pitchers. If there's a team I would bet on to bounce back a little bit next year, it would be the Nationals. I'd feel good about them. But our defending champions, sadly, aren't going to be involved in the 2020 postseason. So enjoy it. Enjoy it while you can, Nationals. This is still your championship. You are the crowned team right now. You get to say that for a little bit longer until we have a new champion this next postseason. For the National League Central, the Chicago Cubs sitting atop at 32-22. They have been just steadily on top of this division start to finish, it feels like. Don't imagine anybody's catching them with a 4.5-game lead over the teams behind them, at least. They do have some injury issues they got to overcome, but all in all, they should be a top 3 seed by the time the season ends. The St. Louis Cardinals and Cincinnati Reds both sitting 4.5 games back. Different records between the two because the Cardinals still trying to catch up in total games at the moment. Cardinals, interesting though, have a positive run differential while the Reds do not. But the Reds have been one of the hotter teams in baseball, 8-2 in their last 10, while the Cardinals have been 6-4. Both considered high probability chances to make the playoffs. The Reds, 79%. The Cardinals, 77%. This is going to be a battle in the NL Central because you have a team right below them in the Brewers too. 53.9% chance of playing in the playoffs. 5.5 game back to the Cubs, only a game back of the Cardinals and Reds. Currently in a series with the Reds, so we can have some movement here that's going to happen. All about the offense. Interesting thing is the run differential is coming around for the Brewers. -6 right now, so it's evening out. They're getting a little more run production, which is the thing they needed considering the strong play of their bullpen and some pitchers like Corbin Burnes as of late. Pittsburgh Pirates, not much to say. worst record in baseball. They're hoping for probably a top draft pick. 17 games behind the Cubs, 1-9 in their last 10. They have just been beaten on recently. The team that a lot of guys are hoping to have on their schedule late in the season to pick up wins that are greatly needed. Then the National League West, the division that was so competitive, so tight for so long, well, it's 2 teams atop, and the rest getting to be a little more interesting. The Dodgers, 38-16, best record in baseball, have a 4-game lead over the Padres, 34-20. Both clinched their playoff spots already. We know they're in. Their run differentials, unbelievable. Plus 119 for the Dodgers. Plus 119. They are the only one that is in triple digits for that. The closest one, well, it's those Padres at plus 84 behind them. So that's a pretty impressive gap. Both teams have put up 300 runs this season. Now, Dodgers 6-4 in their last 10, Padres 7-3. It's going to be hard to make up those 4 games, most likely unrealistic. Behind them, we thought we were going to have a lot of National League West teams make the postseason. It felt that way for a long time. But the Giants fallen off, 26-27. They are a 39% chance to make the postseason now. Colorado Rockies, 24-29, 5% chance. Then the Diamondbacks completely out of it altogether. It's just not looking good for these teams. And you hate to see it happen, especially considering how competitive and how strong these teams were right away. But it's actually turning to be the National League Central and East, taking over those bottom playoff hunting spots. And the NL West is going to have to go back to the drawing board. The Giants have some players, but it's a older team with some of their position guys. Even Mike Yastrzemski, who's considered their young guy, was a rookie last year. He's pushing up to the age of 30. Donovan Solano, who's been great for them, he's over 30. Evan Longoria, I mean, they got a bunch of names of guys that have been producing, doing okay things for them, but older. And then they have some pitching contracts of some older guys as well. We'll see what the Giants do this offseason. It's going to be decisions for them. But if there's one positive, they're probably looking forward to the return of Buster Posey in the future as well, who sat out the season due to COVID concerns. The Rockies, maybe they make some position trades. Nolan Arenado, someone we talked about, Trevor Story. Don't be surprised if some moves come into discussions. And then the Arizona Diamondbacks as well. I can't imagine they come in with the same roster next year. I really highly doubt that. I don't think it's going to happen. So we're going to have to see. We want to take a look at some league leaders as well, but we got to take a quick commercial break before we dive into that. So we'll start off the third segment with some of our league leaders on the season, as well as, well, what are going to be some of the series that matter down the stretch? What are we looking at when it comes to teams fighting for their playoff lives coming up here on the GSMC Baseball Podcast?
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
start talking about all these teams and their division and everything that's been happening, you start to realize that there's so many stories going on for a lot of these teams now. It's kind of been something that's a great deal of fun, for sure. The ups and downs for some teams, some fight that we saw early, fight that we see late. I mean, there's just so much that seems to be going on when it comes to the MLB season. And even to pack down into 60 games, packed all the way down into 60 games, we have a lot to talk about. And hey, interestingly enough, that's gives for great content for not only a viewer, a listener, and a podcast that does a lot of great stuff. But we do need to take a time to dive into some of our, statistical leaders as well. Batting. Hey, in all the MLB, DJ LeMahieu, welcome back to the top batting average. He was one of our guys that we were talking about. Hey, is this going to be our man who bats 400 on the season? Well, 365, not too bad, doing pretty well. Tim Anderson sitting behind him at 355. Juan Soto having a great season, batting 345. And then Donovan Solano, 341. And Freddie Freeman, 340. Freeman, going to definitely be a guy that's going to be talked about when it comes to some National League MVP noise. Should be, for sure. Home runs, Luke Voigt. We thought the 20 home run mark was going to be a solid season. Well, he's at 21 with some time to spare. We'll see how much more he mashes. Right behind him, Jose Abreu sitting there with 18. The ageless Nelson Cruz at 16, Mike Trout, and Manny Machado also with 16 apiece. Definitely littered with a bunch of names that we'll be seeing get some MVP conversations between the American League and National League as well. RBIs, Jose Abreu leads that with 55, 6 above Luke Voigt. Doing a better job of bringing in some runs this season. Freddie Freeman, hey, there he is again, 48 RBIs on the season. And then Marcell Ozuna, 48 as well. Some great production coming for the Atlanta Braves, which makes sense. We talked about all those runs they've been scoring this year. And then Manny Machado again with 46. Hits on the year, Jose Abreu leads with 73. And then Trey Turner with 72. Freddie Freeman, 66. Machado, 65. Or Ozuna, 65. Starting to see these trends of these, consistent names. Pitching leaders, well, when it comes to wins, Shane Bieber stands atop at 8. You got to think he's going to be the consensus Cy Young for the American League. Maybe even MVP votes we'll be talking about. Yu Darvish, Marco Gonzalez, Zach Davies, Max Fried, all sitting there up top with 7 wins apiece. Got a lot of guys that have been consistently hanging around there, doing some great things. When it comes to ERA, Shane Bieber also leading with a 1.74, but we have someone that's catching up to him, a guy who's going to be in the discussion for the National League Cy Young as well, Corbin Burns, at 1.77. He's definitely been one of the hotter pitchers in baseball, making a name for himself with, a big push that the Brewers needed. He's been a great story for him. Trevor Bauer still sitting at a 1.80. He'll be in that discussion for National League Cy Young as well. Max Fried, 1.96. And Dallas Keuchel quietly having a pretty solid season at a 2.04 ERA for the White Sox. Saves, Brad Hand leading the way with 14. Liam Hendricks, 13, been one of the best closers in baseball as well. Ryan Presley with 12. Same with Alex Colome for the White Sox. And then Kenley Jansen with 11. Strikeouts, hey, you heard of him. Shane Bieber, again, having a great season. 112 strikeouts. Next closest, Jacob deGrom with 94. Aaron Nola with 90. Dinelson Lamet, 89 for the San Diego. And Trevor Bauer, 88. Quality starts, something I want to talk about. Lance Lynn, 10 quality starts this year. Again, Rangers, cash in on his value. End of the take right there. Shane Bieber also with 10 quality starts. Yu Darvish, 9. Carlos Carrasco with Cleveland, 8. Again, we talk too much about how great that starting pitching is for the Indians. 2 guys in the top 5 for quality starts. Trevor Bauer with 8 as well. That's just a look at some league leaders. And we got to take the time to also dive into, something that I greatly want to talk about. Series that matter upcoming. We have a pretty good grasp on who's going to be our American League playoff teams. Feel pretty strongly confident about that. It's looking like it's going to be the Rays, Blue Jays, White Sox, Indians, A's, Astros, Twins, and Yankees. Those 8. National League, a lot can happen. A great deal can happen. Right now, it's sitting Dodgers, Phillies, Cubs, Reds, Braves, Cardinals, Padres, Marlins. That's the look right now. So I wanted to take the time talk about these postseason teams. What's going to be the matchups that matter? Now, when you look at the Tampa Bay Rays right away, they just want to win games to lock up the number 1 seed. Mets, Phillies is what they have upcoming. I wouldn't say those are massively important outside of the fact that you just want to win games. Makes sense. Lock up the top spot in the American League. Nothing crazy there. For the Yankees, they are trying to hold off the Blue Jays. Okay? The Blue Jays are 3 games back. Their next 3 games are versus Toronto. This series matters a great deal in the sense that they just need a game or two to give themselves a little bit of a cushion to push out of the wild card and into being one of those second place finishers. Coming out of that, you don't want to be in a very tough spot and end up going to see a Miami team that is fighting for its life to get the best possible seed as well. Because with the way it's been sitting, it's been looking like Marlins Padres 4-5 for quite some time now. I imagine the Marlins do not want to be sitting in that spot because the Padres are a tough draw as a number 4 seed. So the Yankees really, really, really need to be taking, at minimum, a game from the Blue Jays in their next 3 that they have. So Blue Jays as well, 3 games versus the Yankees. And if they can make up some ground there, something that sits nicely for them, 3 games versus Baltimore coming after it. For the American League Central, the White Sox, they have a team in Cleveland that is fighting to come back. They are holding off the Twins. So these 3 games versus Cleveland are huge for them. Not only to lock up the American League Central, but fight off Minnesota. Minnesota's schedule does not look nearly as tough as the White Sox, as they have those 3 versus Cleveland, 3 versus the Cubs. Well, the Twins, they have 2 versus Detroit, and then 3 versus Cincinnati. But luckily for the White Sox, Cincinnati is fighting for their life to get in the postseason as well. The Indians, this is where things could get interesting for them. White Sox 3 games. Pick up what you can. But the series that matters afterwards for them, 3 games against Pittsburgh. You need to take all 3 of those and try your best to slide into a 2 spot out of the wild card, maybe even potentially climbing as far up to win a Central if possible. American League West, the Athletics, they're in kind of the same boat as the Rays. Win out. Win as many games as you can. Unfortunately, 3 against the Dodgers, 4 versus Seattle. But win. I wouldn't say one series is more important than the other. Try to gather as many wins as you can the rest of the way out. For the Astros, these 2 games that they have versus Seattle, they just lost last night, Monday night, against Seattle. They are holding on to a 3-game lead. 2 more can make this a 1-game situation, and we'll see what happens. Now, the Astros are lucky in the sense that they end the year with 4 games at Texas, while the Mariners, unfortunately, end it with 4 games at Oakland. But we've talked about this in the past. If things are getting close and interesting there, and let's say that the A's are out of the top spot, maybe they know they're going to fall in at the 3rd spot in the American League. Maybe that's guaranteed. Do they help out a Mariners team make it over the Houston Astros? I don't like thinking about it because these are the biggest competitors at the highest level. I understand that. But would they maybe try to do something to make sure that Houston makes it, or Houston doesn't make it and the Mariners do? I'm not closing the door on that because the percentages obviously don't look great, but it's still there. The National League East, the Braves, win. They're sitting the same way. 3 games against Miami, which is the team behind them. Build a cushion, then 3 games versus Boston. Try to get the highest possible seed in the National League. The Marlins, if you have hopes and aspirations to win this National League East, you need to take these 3 games that are left versus Atlanta to try to make it 1 game before you go see the New York Yankees. That's definitely not something you want to be faring with. But the Marlins are also trying to work hard to hold off a Phillies team, so win is also the same priority for them. Philadelphia Phillies, 3 games at Washington. They lost on Monday to the Nationals. That cannot be happening for them. Cannot. They need to do whatever they can to hold off for that 8th playoff seed. It's just, They are a team with so much potential, so much talent. And I would say I would be a little disappointed if they end up not making the postseason. That loss versus the Nationals is just a killer. Just a killer. Seeing if they can take the second one in the doubleheader. Currently, as I'm recording this, they're up 2-0 in the top of the third. So we'll see what happens with them going forward. The Mets, again, not completely out of it, but 2 games versus Tampa Bay might knock them out of it pretty good. And then 4 games versus Washington, which helps, but they might be too far gone to even make a jump into it at that point. 3 games at Pittsburgh for the Chicago Cubs to try and lock up their playoff spot. Don't lose those because you don't want to have a 3-game series versus Chicago White Sox become how you have to hold off some teams and get your best possible record. Take those 3 versus Pittsburgh, set yourself up, you'll be solid. Especially considering this, 4.5 games right now is a pretty comfortable lead. And, they hold the 2 seed in the National League total. Just don't give up any ground. Don't put any doubt out there if you're the Chicago Cubs. The Cardinals, 2 games at Kansas City. Must win. Because after that, here is the series that might end up being the most important across this. The Brewers, we're going to be talking about them a little bit. 5 games versus the Cardinals. The winner of that series most likely makes the postseason between the two. Going to be a wild card spot, maybe even the 2 seed. But the winner of that series is most likely getting into a postseason. Don't blow that. And when we continue talking about that Brewers, their schedule is set up for them to try and make something here. 2 games against Cincinnati left. 5 games versus Seattle. A winning record probably in those 7 games will get you in. But you got to have that winning record and hope for a little bit of help. The Reds, talk about it, those 2 games versus Milwaukee, but 3 games at Minnesota afterwards, which is going to be a crucial series for them, considering that the Twins are going to be fighting for American League Central. The National League West, the Dodgers just trying to hold off the Padres. Win as many games as you can. 3 versus Oakland might be tough, but then you get the Angels for 3 games. See what you can do there. I imagine the Dodgers put up a ton of runs in that situation. Padres, similar in the sense, 2 games versus the Angels. I imagine they score a lot of runs. 4 at San Francisco. It gets interesting in the sense if San Francisco has a chance to still make the playoffs. That's where we'll be in discussion on whether the series is too great. My ideal thoughts right now, probably no. The Giants, 3 games versus Colorado, 4 versus San Diego. If they take 3 games versus Colorado, we'll be talking about them a little bit more. Problem is they just lost one to the Rockies, which will make that Padres series even tougher. And then the Rockies, those 3 games versus San Francisco, yeah, they took 1. Can you sweep? And then can you sweep the Diamondbacks with 4 after that? That's where your question's going to be. I can't count these teams out just yet, but some of them just really have a long, long hill to climb. So we'll see what happens there. So we're going to take one more break, and then we're going to come back. We got to talk about our last segment, which is going to be what's some of our playoff predictions. Going to talk about who we think some of these final teams are going to be to make it, maybe some potential series, and some other things that we might potentially see in the postseason here on the GSMC Baseball Podcast on the GSMC Podcast Network.
Want to know the latest in soccer? Then listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast. From MLS, the World Cup, and the Premier League, we've got you covered. The latest updates, the hottest matches, and news on the league's top players. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast.
David Beckham scores the goal to take England all the way to the World Cup finals.
Listen now.
It's funny. I really love just taking in all types of sports. I doing the baseball podcast. I obviously love the MLB. It's got a soft spot in my heart. Baseball fan, been that way my entire life. My family grew up around baseball. We play baseball a lot. I mean, love the game. But I also love taking in sports from the NFL and the NBA. Massive, massive fans of both of those. I watch the games religiously. I play, obviously, fantasy football. Love that. Keeping up with my teams. Die-hard NBA fan. I mean, if you lived through what I lived through with the Milwaukee Bucks, seeing them succeed, you'd be taking in things. But one of the podcasts I love listening to would happen to be the Hoop Collective. Talks about NBA. And the guy who really runs that, Brian Windhorst for ESPN. And I hit home with him a little bit here because if there's one thing that he always talks about is that he doesn't make predictions. He just tells the story of what he thinks could happen, but I'm not predicting anything. Well, I'm going to break that rule. I never do this. I never do this on the podcast, really. I give you who I would vote for at spots for awards, who I thought could be in there, but predictions, not necessarily something that I've been crazy in doing. But we're going to do it today. We're going to take the dive. We're going to try it out. Some of these not too crazy, but some of them, hey, we're going to talk about it. We're going to see what we have. I want to talk about first who we think the final teams are going to be to make the postseason. Now, the American League is easy. We know Rays, White Sox, A's. Those three have all clinched. The Twins have clinched. The Yankees have clinched. We're sitting at Astros, Indians, Blue Jays. The Indians are about as good as locked. The Blue Jays as well. The only real team in any type of what feels like question is the Astros if they just go through a horrible slump to end the year. And I'm going to, shocker, take the prediction that I don't think that's going to happen. But I do have my concerns with some teams. I really, really do. One concern that I have, for sure, is based solely around the White Sox ending as the top team in the American League Central. Their offense has been impressive. We've talked about it. 280 runs on the year, plus 72 run differential. They've gotten some surprising pitching. But of the teams in the American League Central hunt between the White Sox, Twins, and Indians, the White Sox clearly have the toughest schedule. Clearly have the toughest. 3 games at Cleveland. If there is a team that's set up to give the White Sox any type of trouble, it's Cleveland in the sense that their pitching is so strong. So incredibly strong. And that matters because we see it every single postseason. Every single postseason. Some pitching can come in and really silence some bats. So they have to see Shane Bieber and Zach Plesac in upcoming games. If they get swept by the Indians or lose 3 out of 4, they have to go into their final series facing the Chicago Cubs, a team that's also jockeying for some playoff position. It's, a little bit of a rival as well, which will make that series even more competitive. I am kind of feeling the sense that I don't think they win the American League Central. I think it's going to be the Twins that jump up there. I worry that the Indians have too much ground to make up with that 2.5 between the Twins as well. And the Twins have the luxury of playing the Tigers for the next 2 games. That should be 2 wins. I greatly don't know if the Indians can make up any ground in those. And yeah, then there's 3 games versus Cincinnati. The only thing that gets interesting here is if it's within a half game of the Twins and the Indians take 3 versus Pittsburgh. But if there's one thing that I think is not going to happen, I think the White Sox are going to fall out of the top of the American League Central. And if that does happen, we are then talking about the White Sox as potentially the top 2 seed. But they could fall and be a wild card. And man, is that someone that you just don't want to see? You just don't want to see. Would you want to be the Rays sitting atop, or the A's, or maybe the Twins, and you have to see the White Sox in the first round in a 3-round playoff? You got to face that offense and hope that your pitching is strong enough to take them out in 3 games. I have a feeling that the White Sox are going to be a team that falls just a little bit at the end of the season, and we're going to talk about them as the lower seed taking out a higher seed in the postseason. What about a matchup that would be 4-5 Yankees White Sox. Those two offenses going up against each other. Oh, would that be fun? That would be just a great deal of fun to see. That's one thing I'm feeling pretty strong about. I feel like they're going to fall off just because their schedule is tougher, and the other two teams, they have it just a little bit lighter. But it all is going to fall on the Indians. Can they make a little noise to do things? One other thing that I think is going to happen, I think the Astros are going to sweat this out. I think the Mariners are truly going to make them sweat. If they can take these next two games, it makes it a one-game series. And I still, if it got to one game after the Mariners sweeping, would not feel confident in the Mariners 4 games versus Oakland, the Astros 4 games versus Texas. But I really do think the Astros are going to sweat this out to the last couple games. I really do. And just don't count out a young team. A young team that's got nothing to lose. They're out there playing, having fun. It's going to be something to watch. I think the Astros make it in, but I'm going to be watching this closely. In the National League, I think there's a solid chance that we see 4 teams potentially make it from the NL Central. I don't feel confident in the sense where I'm 100% putting my money on this, my chips down on the table. But I don't believe greatly in that Giants team coming down the stretch. I don't believe in them really at all. I think they're going to fizzle out, especially considering the fact that they have, the 3 games versus Colorado, but they just lost 1 versus Colorado. But 4 games versus San Diego team that's going to be fighting to potentially stay at that as high as they can. I think the Giants get thumped and they're knocked out. The only team that really stays in this conversation is the Phillies. But they just lost versus the Nationals team. I'm sure this Nationals team would love to still take it to them. And then 3 games versus Tampa Bay. I'm leaning towards 4 teams making it out of this National League Central because their stretches are a bunch of these guys playing against each other, and I feel like they're going to split a lot of these games. So the Cardinals with the 5 games versus the Brewers, the Reds having 2 games versus Milwaukee still, and the Brewers obviously 7 games against the 2. I feel like they walk out of there 3-4, 4-3. A lot of these teams do, and they just hold on and sneak in 4 teams into the playoffs. And if that's the case, we are really going to be having one heck of an offseason talking about this Phillies team and what they're going to do. Because they are built to make a postseason with all the money that has been put in, all the free agents, all the trades. They have been pushing for themselves to be contenders. After you change the format to 8 teams making it in the National League, and then you miss the playoffs, that Philadelphia fan base, they go crazy about this stuff. We know how Philadelphia fans can be. We've seen it with the Eagles, with the 76ers, and any different with the Phillies. They're harsh on those Phillies. I think there's a solid chance that 4 teams make it from the Central. And if you would have asked me a month ago if there was a division where 4 teams were going to make it, I would have told you the NL West with a heartbeat. I really would have. How the season has changed. It just looks like it's set up, especially looking at the schedule, the rest of the way. That's what I think is going to happen. One other thing I want to watch. Living up here in the north, right? Very close. I'm actually closer to the Twins than I am the Brewers. But living in Wisconsin, a lot of Brewers fans. I have some feeling, and I don't know what it's going to be, that the baseball gods are going to make it happen. That the Yankees and Twins are going to somehow match up in the first round. It's somehow going to happen. And the Twins fans, you hear them joke about it too. Like they crack the joke, ha ha ha, Twins, we can't get them. But if they see that matchup coming in that 3-game series, I know they're all going to be thinking, really? Again? We have to do this again? We just added 3 more teams to the postseason, and we have to see the Yankees again? That's another one that I'm just kind of hoping and praying for. I want it to happen, mainly just because I want to see how Twins fans are going to handle it. That's what I live around a lot. I think it's going to be great. I think in this postseason as well, we are going to see a great deal, and this is just the way it's going to match up. Obviously, this is nothing crazy, But we're going to have a lot of division matchups in the first round of 3-game series, and that's what's going to make this playoff idea stick around. We're going to come out of this 3-game first round, and we're going to talk about upsets, quote-unquote upsets, when in all reality we should know by now in baseball anything can happen in a 3-game series. If you watch all regular season, if you watch the first week of baseball, anything can happen in a 3-game series. We're going to get some teams knocked out of this thing, and we're going to go nuts in media, on podcasts, on ESPN, on whatever, wherever you're getting your information. And it's going to bring excitement to the game, which is what the MLB wants. They are trying to draw in young fans. And yeah, I know there's a hit that gets taken if you lose a major market. But there's something to be said about, hey, unpredictable postseason. Unpredictable postseason brings in attention. Now, it'll be interesting to see if viewership numbers take a hit because of it. I definitely would be really wanting to watch, see what these television numbers, viewership, what happens. But for me, as a sports fanatic, someone who follows these games closely, whatever sport it is, I love the upset. I love rooting for the underdog. If there is one thing that people say in sports that's great, that brings in viewership, it's that team that everyone hates. I would also argue that we love seeing that team that we didn't expect to be there just as much. Just as much. I sit here and I look at the NBA playoffs. I'm a Bucks fan. I know, and it's been tough for me. I don't want to root for these higher seeds that are left now that my team's gone. I want to see upsets. I want to see things that was not predicted, that we didn't see coming. I want to see new guys come to the limelight. I think it's going to be the same way for the MLB. And it's going to be fun. It's going to be a great deal of fun, and I think we would enjoy it. You can't tell me you wouldn't have some excitement in baseball going forward if you saw the Blue Jays take over the Rays. Sorry, Tampa Bay Rays fans. I mean, your guys' team has been steady for quite some time, but I think a lot of people in baseball would be a lot more excited seeing this Blue Jays team with all of this young talent over Tampa Bay. And that's looking like a series that it would be, especially, which if you have not been paying attention to the Blue Jays as of recent, they're pretty dang close to full health with everyone back with Guerrero, Bichette, Biggio, Gurriel, Hernandez. But they got a new guy, who if you have not seen him, Alejandro Kirk, the 5'8", 250-pound masher. We won't see him probably behind the plate a lot, but this dude swings a fun stick, and he's going to be an exciting player that I think a lot of people fall in love with pretty quickly. Would love to see it. I don't think that's anything crazy. Going along that same tone, out of the 8 total series, I wouldn't be surprised to see, close to half of them becoming upsets. The lower seed taking them. And maybe it's not really fair to consider a 5 seed taking down a 4 seed, but even looking at the projections we have, if things continue out, the Marlins over the Padres would be a massive upset. Now the Yankees over the Twins probably wouldn't be, but getting one of those would be huge. Could the Cardinals take out a Braves team? Now this is obviously looking at positioning right now. 6/3. That could happen. The Reds taking the Cubs in 3 games. For sure, that could happen. The Phillies and the Dodgers. Yeah, the Dodgers, I would put a lot of money on them. But that Phillies offense get going for 3 days? 3 games? Are you going to tell me that you don't think it's possible that they would make it? Now, I obviously think that they might knock them out, so let's throw the Brewers in there. You're telling me that the Brewers offense, maybe not possible to click for 3 days, but it's been better as of late. Corbin Burns pitches a good game. Woodruff pitches a good game. It goes to the bullpen. That gets interesting. American League, yeah, Yankees over Twins. That's not going to shock anyone. The Astros come in. Their offense clicks for 3 games. That's not going to shock anybody. The Indians come in at a 7. Their pitchers shut down the White Sox. No shock there. We talked about the Blue Jays and Rays. I think we're going to see more upsets than we probably planned for. Like I said, I don't know if it's fair to really bash a team if they get upset. 3-game series in baseball. Crazy things happen all the time. All the time. That's something that I feel like is going to happen. So there's just a few predictions, a few things that I think could happen. I think the NL Central is going to surprise. I think they're going to send 4 teams. I really do. I think the White Sox fall out of the American League Central. I think we're going to see some playoff upsets. I really do. 3 things that I don't think would be crazy. I don't think would be crazy at all. So fun stuff. The closer we get to the postseason, it's going to be great. I'm looking forward to the next podcast on Sunday. I already got stuff written down that I want to do. I want to talk about some major awards, other postseason talk. Talk about the World Series, stuff we'd like to see, and a lot of fun conversation to be had. Baseball season, man. We're hitting a great fun point. So that's going to be it for me on the GSMC Baseball Podcast and the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Collin Manley. I want to thank you again for tuning in, listening tonight, today, whenever you had the chance. Would love it if you could leave a nice review. Your comments, your thoughts. What do you think could happen in the postseason? What team am I not talking about that could make it? Who am I giving love to that you agree with? Love to hear from you. But until next time, this is me, Collin Manley, GSMC Baseball Podcast.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.